There are leaders in the world who are made for impact.
We think and act in terms of the grand gesture when the 5-minute fix usually does the trick.
I'm Gretchen Schott, and this is Made for Impact, a show for leaders who want to leave a lasting impact on their organizations, their teams, and their lives. There are leaders in the world who are made for impact. Karen Mangia is making an impact. Karen is the president and chief strategy officer at the Engineered Innovation Group. She's also the author of several best-selling books and got her start in technology working for organizations such as Cisco and Salesforce. Karen and I got connected a few months ago. We have a number of friends in the coaching and L&D space. And after a quick conversation, we decided that she needed to be on the show and share some of her wisdom with us today. Karen has a passion for helping leaders unlock their ideas and innovate on those ideas. And in our interview today, we talk about her journey, and she shares some tips on how to create more joy in your life and how to unlock some of those big ideas. Take a listen. Karen, I'm so grateful that you're on the show. Thank you for being here.
It's so great to be here. I mean, sometimes it gets lonely in my home office, so I love these conversations.
I know I'm at my house too, and I'm like, oh, I get to be on the podcast and talk to somebody else today. Yay, it's so fun. So, Karen, for folks who maybe don't know you, tell our listeners a little bit about you and your career journey.
I think about my career a little bit like the Godfather trilogy. Not just because I'm Sicilian, it's because I worked at 3 large enterprise organizations. First AT&T, then Cisco, then Salesforce. And I made the choice this year to exit the world of enterprises and step into the world of entrepreneurship. I have a longtime friend and former Salesforce colleague who started a business called the Engineered Innovation Group. And I am president and chief strategy officer of that organization. So I've stepped into taking all of those skills and learnings from the enterprise world and being able to have the opportunity now to apply those in a new context. And in addition to that, I am the author of 5 books and host of a podcast called Success from Anywhere.
I love that you used a Godfather metaphor because I keep thinking and they keep bringing you back in because I felt that way myself in my career. They keep sucking you back in.
Exactly. It happens, doesn't it?
I love it. I love it. I love it. So I want to talk a little bit about some of your books because I know that you've written a number. Most of them are all best-selling. And one of them, though, is this great cookbook that you wrote about your family, which I think is so cool. So share just a little bit about that because I think that's really interesting. And I think people will find that interesting as well.
Having written 4 books, I was convinced that I had nothing left to say worth writing down. And then along came this idea. I don't have to write down my thoughts. I could write down someone else's. And I started reflecting on who are the inspiring and sometimes influential people that I've met throughout the course of my career and my life. And what I came to discover is that the person who has taught me the most is my soon to be 100-year-old grandfather. He's a first generation American, a World War II veteran. And I'm fortunate that we have been sharing Sunday dinners together for years now.
I love that.
And when I was thinking about something worth writing down, as well as being able to offer some help and hope to people who are feeling uncertain and maybe even a little isolated right now, the idea came together of extending a virtual invitation for people to join our Sunday dinners and listen in on our conversations and be a part of our family. And that became this beautiful book called Sundays with Salvatore.
I love
52
it.
recipes to cultivate conversation, connection, and community. And across the 52 chapters in the book, themed around 52 weeks in a year, there's a story in each chapter, a piece of wisdom from him, a pause and ponder prompt about how to make his wisdom your own, and one of our treasured family recipes, along with lots of photos. And he wrote the afterword to the book. And we also included essentially his 10 principles for living, because everyone wants to know, first of all, how do you live to 100? And more importantly, how do you live well at 100, which he is. He's still in his own home. He walks, he plants a garden, he cooks. He's truly remarkable. And I feel like he has some wisdom that's relevant for all of us. It's both timely and timeless.
I love that. There's so many things about that that's so great. Number one, you've had this wonderful experience with your family and that you're being so vulnerable and sharing it. And then two, that you're actually documenting this wisdom within your family unit. So, how has your family received this goal that you had to do this?
They have been excited about it for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a wonderful way to preserve some of our family stories and recipes for a time when, unfortunately, he'll no longer be here to share those with us. The other aspect of it, as well, that's been really rewarding for the whole family is the opportunity to revisit some favorite moments in time and some lessons that they've learned through the years from my grandfather. So it's been great for giving people an opportunity to travel down memory lane and revisit some of those places that we lose sight of on a day to day basis. And ultimately, the really beautiful thing about being able to do this with my grandfather while he's still living is that really now there's truly nothing left unsaid between us.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. How does one decide to create a goal like this? Like you said, you've written 4 books and then you had this incredible goal now to write this book and you've achieved that. So what is your process for really getting into like a goal setting around something like this?
The way I think about it, and actually it's a formula I shared in my first book called Success with Less,
Mhm.
and it is pause, ponder, prioritize. And here's the reason I say that. When we are clear about our top priority and why that priority matters to us so much, we are more inspired to create space for that in our lives.
Mm.
And here's what happens for me. So if I have a goal that's write a book or train to run in an event or doing a singing performance, I do music and performing arts.
Of course
What
you
I
do.
will do, yes, if that's something that's a priority for me, I will press pause on something else. What I like to
Mm.
say is, while I'm writing a book, I'm not also learning a third language and training for a marathon and making Pinterest perfect meals. What I'm doing is saying, my top priority at this moment is to do this book with my grandfather. And therefore, because it's a top priority, it's what success means to me right now. What am I willing to pause to create space for that? Realizing that when this project or priority shifts, I can choose to resume any number of those activities if I wish. And I think what happens so often is we think about life and priorities as an and, where we keep adding to the list as opposed to an or. And pausing something doesn't mean you'll never return to it. It just means create a little space for what matters most and understand that each thing you say yes to on that journey is either going to move you closer toward or further from that priority, which gives you a chance to consider, do I have the right priority? And if I do, the yes and the no is a lot easier. It creates an incredible filter. And I found that to be helpful and freeing because I realize I have a reason to say no or press pause and that I can give myself permission to do that without feeling like I'm quitting something or that I'm expected to be superhuman and endlessly be able to find energy to add more things to the list.
Yeah, or you're not achieving something because you're making other decisions, which I think is also part of the problem that people don't use that pause. I love that pause is in there because they feel like, first of all, I don't have time to pause because I have to go and I have to achieve. I have to be putting on my cape and be a super person. So yeah, that's so wise. I love it. Is this an and or is this an or? I love that. I'd love for you to share because you're quite a successful person and you have this diverse background of exciting things that you do. What do you believe is the biggest hurdle or roadblock that people have in setting and then achieving goals?
We think and act in terms of the grand gesture when the 5-minute fix usually does the trick. And here's what I mean by that. We'll decide, I'm so burnt out. So what happens? We start fantasizing like, I need to take a sabbatical. I
Mm.
need a 3-week vacation now. I mean, I'm so far gone. I need this massive opportunity to reset. And really what you need is define 5. You just need a meeting that ends 5 minutes early and that for 5 minutes you do nothing. If it's you're thinking, I'm really out of shape, the default is, well, then I should train for a half marathon.
Mhm.
Try walking around the block. What I think happens in terms of goals, and it's wonderful to be aspirational and it's wonderful to have a big, exciting something on the horizon that we feel motivated to move toward. What happens is we get stuck in place when we feel like we need 3 weeks or a month or an entirely new degree in order to get closer to that big dream. When if we could back it down and say, what can I do for 5 minutes today that moves me toward that dream? If you're picturing that you're going to go hike the Appalachian Trail as a sabbatical, that's great. For 5 minutes today, find a blog of someone who's done it and subscribe. That's it. That's all you had to do today. Tomorrow, print out a picture, put it in a frame, put it on your desk. 5 minutes. Next, research hiking boots. Whatever this looks like, download an app that helps you train. We think we have to be big and take big steps and do time consuming things. It's overwhelming because
Yeah.
then we start talking ourselves out of it because it's like, well, to the point you made earlier, I can't find the time. I can't find the time. And then we start to punish ourselves, right? I'm failing at my dream. I'm failing at my big goal. So then we kind of stop setting goals.
Yeah. Or I don't dream big enough because now it just feels like this is not that big a deal. It's really not going to make that big of an impact. It's not going to make that much difference. I may as well not even get started. I'll just be miserable.
Yes.
What advice do you have for leaders who are listening to this and they want to achieve goals, but only see themselves adding value if they hit a number or if they have a quota that they have to achieve? What's your advice for folks like that?
Quantifying success is a slippery slope. And I will use a simple, close to home example. We all remember what it was like to be a part of the pandemic lockdown because we all had that experience together.
Mm-hmm.
In my particular instance, I had signed a contract to write my book, Listen Up, the beginning of 2020, and my manuscript was due May 1st. When we went on lockdown, my thought to myself was, I'll have more time to write a better book.
That's right.
Without
So much
taking such a
time.
toll on myself. I won't be on airplanes and socializing. Great. I submitted that manuscript May 1st. About a week and a half later, I was talking to my senior editor at Wiley, and we started talking about working from home. And I was asking her, what's it like to work from home in the publishing industry?
Yeah.
And in tech, we already knew how to use the tools, right? We kind of knew how to do our jobs, use the tools. Yes, the context was incredibly stressful, of course.
Right.
And the concern for human quality of life and existence was very real. The technical underpinnings of how we do work in tech, though, really wasn't going to change.
That barrier was not present. Yeah.
Barrier was not there. And she started sharing the challenges of it. And I said, yes, I've been writing a blog about working from home. And it's been going crazy. And she said, working from home, do you think you could write a book about that? And I laughed and said one of the dumbest things I've ever said. I said, in my sleep. By the way, you can't write a book in your sleep. You actually can't. She said, great. Could you do it in 2 weeks? And I was like, no.
Oh my gosh.
She said, how about 30 days? And I said, why not? So I just submitted a manuscript for a book, wrote another book in 27 days. And from the time she and I had that conversation until I physically held the working from home book in my hands was 87 days. Like I preempted my own book with my own book.
Wow.
When I say that out loud, it sounds miraculous, right? I mean, this is like you had a quota and you hit the quota and then you achieved a stretch performance or you're past, you've passed the bar and cleared it so substantially. And yet, when the book started shipping, I had this number of books in my mind that had to be sold for that working from home book to be successful. It somehow wasn't enough that I wrote 2 books, even though I was only supposed to write one, and that there was a global pandemic. I mean, in the quota of career, authorship, or life, I mean, I was firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
And yet in my head, by the way, there was no logic to the number I selected. Like I just selected a number and decided that
That's
book
it.
and by extension, I would not be successful if I did not sell this amount of books during a global pandemic.
Wow.
That sounds crazy. And yet we all do this to ourselves.
Yeah.
And what I discovered about that is when we need to quantify success, We make that an appointment on our calendar and it's always on the horizon and we'll never quite get there because it always gets pushed out or postponed or put onto somebody else's calendar, or we artificially adjust our own threshold.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Success is best, and we feel most successful when we allow success to show up moment by moment and not always needing to quantify it with a metric or a measure.
So when you're talking with folks that are in sales roles, right? So I run into this a lot of times with people who are salespeople that are like, well, my goal is my number. Like, that's how I know I add value, right? And so trying to really help them think differently about value. What encouragement would you give to folks that are like that?
I have been a salesperson for many years and I have led many, many sales teams, and I hear you. And it's challenging because what gets reinforced in your daily environment is that your value is tied to that valuation.
Mhm.
And what I came to learn the hard way is that there is a difference between value and values. And
Mm.
here's what I mean by that. It might surprise you to discover, looking at me now and having this conversation and hearing what sounds like my endless energy and appetite for life. It might surprise you to discover that in my early 30s, when I was a sales leader with a wildly successful team, and if you looked at my LinkedIn, you would have wanted my life or my career or some combination thereof, mysterious things started happening. I was getting a little forgetful. I was gaining a little weight. I was explaining it all away, because I'm busy. I'm leading a huge sales team and we
Yep.
are crushing it and we are on the climb. And one day there comes an impossible to ignore moment where I go to pick up my mobile device to phone my brother, and I can't remember his name. I have
Wow.
one brother and I call him every Sunday. I had to use the process of elimination of knowing that we shared the same last name to reduce the number of contacts in my phone until I could deduce which person he was. It was an
Wow.
impossible to ignore moment. Unbeknownst to me at the time, that ended up sending me on a 3.5 year journey of major medical misdiagnosis. And along the way, my hair fell out, my skin turned gray, my eyes changed color. I gained 55 pounds, didn't have a baby, and nobody knew what was wrong with me.
Oh.
And I never missed a day of work.
Oh my goodness,
Doesn't that
Karen.
sound crazy? When
Yeah.
I say it out loud, it sounds crazy. And somebody listening right now hasn't missed a day of work for anything in a long time, not for a vacation, not for a doctor's appointment, not for rest.
Mhm.
And you know what? In that moment, my boss didn't show up and say, "You seem ill. Why don't you take some time off?" Now,
Oh my
granted, the number
gosh.
was still there, but held against the context of my highest values at that moment in time were to find out what was wrong with me and get healthy.
Mhm.
It no longer mattered to me the value that a company placed on my existence in the form of dollar amount, because I
Yeah.
would have given up any amount of money to have my health.
Right.
When we are clear about our values, whether we make our quota or don't make our quota, or the years where it goes up so exponentially you couldn't make it if you tried, or the economy crashes, if the way you value yourself is tied to a valuation that someone else quantifies in dollars and puts on your head, rather than the values you hold inside of yourself about who you are and what matters most to you, you're always going to be chasing some kind of healthy and toxic environment like the
Mhm.
one that I was in. Because what happens is we poison ourselves with this set of beliefs and we adopt someone else's definition of success. Hey, my area VP's definition of success at that point was a 7-figure dollar amount
Yep.
that came in every single month. When I got so sick, my value I placed on myself was being healthy enough to enjoy my life. It was the turning point in everything for me.
Yeah. Wow. And so everyone who's listening to this now, when you just walked through that, all those you're healthy now and
I
you're in a much better place now, yes?
I am, and people always ask me what I had because they wanna make sure they don't
They
catch
don't
it.
have it?
And what I had, and I find this to be quite ironic, is that I had DDT, pesticide poisoning.
Oh.
And when you think about the poignancy of that, there was poison physically coursing through my body. And the reason I got so sick and stayed so sick for so long is that I had poisoned myself with a toxic set of beliefs about what success was and
Mhm.
how you measure it and what I was willing to do to get it. So as much as I had to get that poison out of my body, which took another 5 years, I also had to detox some very poisonous beliefs that I was carrying inside of my own mind and allowing other people to inflict on me that I internalized. And I'm grateful for that experience now because it forced me to step back and say, if nobody knows what was wrong with me and I potentially truly only have a short amount of time to live, is what I value most chasing one more cold call or signing one more contract or closing out
Mm.
one more quarter end?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably not.
So what was your process for getting some of those poisons out of your head?
There were some words I realized I needed to stop using. Some top of mind, never. I'll never be healthy. The pressure of this job will never end.
I'll never have time.
I'll never have time.
Yeah.
Next word on the list was should.
Mm.
You should call so and so. You should plan to get together with blah, blah, blah. You should volunteer for such and such. You should take on the special project. You should be on the board. Should is an excellent indicator that we are doing something that is outside of alignment with our values in order to please or perform for someone other than ourselves.
Ooh, I like that. I haven't thought about should that way, but that is great. Yeah. What else?
And then it started with kind of the 5-minute fix I was talking about, giving myself
Yeah.
permission to start ratcheting back some of the commitments on my calendar 5 minutes at a time, then 5 meetings at a time, then 5 days at a time, and really
Yeah.
zooming out and thinking about if I'm going to create space to get healthy, what am I willing to release in order to gain progress on that front?
Yeah. Great. I love that. I love that. Kind of on the same, since you have this great sales experience, and I know that there are people that are, especially when they're going to hear this, is going to be like probably the beginning of a quarter and trying to get going, going, going. So, what are some tips that you have for leaders who recognize like mid month they're not on track to hit a goal? What do you suggest they do? Because I think that that's something that a lot of sales managers struggle with their direct reports. And I don't know that they always know how to advise someone except for like, well, you know your number. So do what you need to do, which is like the most unhelpful advice ever.
I agree. And I've been given that advice by leaders in my own sales journey. And I hear you. That's a challenging feeling. First and foremost, escalate early.
Mhm.
So activate that network of people around you. If you're the individual sales contributor, sales executive, that would be, your first line manager and so on up the line. So give earlier visibility and ask for input, assistance, support, engagement
Mhm.
in your pipeline, in activating their network, in engaging their expertise. Most often, and I think it's because as salespeople, we tend to be very independent and want to go make things happen on our own. And we tend to
Mhm.
prize and reward people who operate in that way. We want to believe we've got it and we're all alone with the stress of it. And then we're publicly punished.
Mm.
The deal is the earlier you escalate, the more you activate people to help think through things you're not seeing.
Mm.
Next is there's a fascinating domino effect that happens when that panic kicks in of I don't think I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
It's that you start looking at every single thing because you're trying to speed up your activity level to do more.
Yep.
And what happens is suddenly everything feels urgent. Everything from alphabetizing the spices in your cabinet to helping your kids with their science fair project to contacting more customers to cleaning out that junk drawer that you've been needing to clean out for forever. Everything suddenly takes on an equal level of urgency and importance because you're forcing yourself to sustain this adrenaline laden state.
Mhm.
The reality is, if everything is important, then nothing is
I think it's
important.
important. Yeah.
And in those moments, operating from a place of calm means creating a little space. And so I have found 3 questions and a bonus question that help me create space so that I can operate from a calm place and make connecting with customers or prospects or engaging these others around me and closing these deals a priority and create space for them. So it's first, does it have to be? Second, does it have to be me?
Mhm.
Third, does it have to be me right now? And bonus question for the win, does it have to be a meeting? I can't tell you how many people I see who are salespeople and sales leaders who are on the verge of not making their number and they're still attending the sales training session or going to the networking event.
Mhm.
You don't need to be at a networking event just then. You might need to go later, but it doesn't have to be you right now.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't need to meet with your mentor this week because they're not going to help you close deals. Maybe you need to meet with your executive vice president of sales instead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I often give wisdom around when people are talking about having to have difficult conversations. I share things like, ask yourself, like, does something need to be said? Does it need to be said right now? And does it need to be said by me? Because if it's not yes to all of those things, then you need to rethink, like, why do I feel a sense of urgency to have this taken care of? Or am I inserting myself in a situation where I don't need to be, and I need to just inform and let the people who need to manage that versus getting worked up about, like, I need to have this conversation. I need to have it right now. To your sense of urgency, everything becomes very, very urgent. So I would love for you to describe some ways a person might show up with a fixed mindset, because I know when you and I were talking before about kind of having this conversation, we were talking a lot about like growth mindset and fixed mindset. So, can you describe for managers what it looks like for you to show up with a fixed mindset? And what are some things that maybe managers need to pay attention to so that they can recognize it?
I will pull a piece of wisdom from my grandfather on this one, and it's
Yay.
relevant. Here's what a fixed mindset looks like, and it's particularly prevalent in sales leadership: my way or the highway. Think about this. We get prescriptive, right? We want to know how many phone calls do you have to make to how many cold prospects to generate how many leads in what amount of time that becomes pipeline that we filter down through this thing from the top of the funnel to the bottom funnel. We take on the tree, blah, 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 blah. What if that's not the only way to win?
Mm.
Maybe it's not. My way or the highway says, I know best and I'm going to tell you what to do. So I'm going to do all the thinking and you do what I tell you to do. That is a dangerous and slippery slope where we miss things, because what happens is we miss the opportunity to ask the question, what else could this be?
Mm-hmm.
What else could this mean? What else might we try? I realize sales is a very long time profession. And I will tell you that not everything works for everybody. And the mindset of people who are exceptional sales leaders and sales performers is flexible within a framework. Yes, there are some hallmark behaviors of people who are successful salespeople with regard to consistency and building trust and rapport, and how they research and prepare for a conversation or a meeting or facilitate bringing in outside resources. Absolutely. Does it mean that every step in that process works the same way and needs to go in the same order every single time in every single sales situation? No, it does not. What we do is we default to, there's a playbook. In fact, I love it because in most sales organizations, there is literally something called the sales
The
playbook,
playbook. Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. Just follow the playbook.
Imagine this weekend, if you were watching a sporting event, let's just pick football, and you only saw the quarterback throw the same pass to the same receiver every single time. The coach would be fired before the game was over, right?
Well, when fans watch games and they think that that's happening, that's when they're so fired up. Like, oh my gosh, do a different play, run a different
Change the
play.
play call, right?
Oh,
In sports,
yes,
that's why they call it calling an audible, right?
yes,
Because you're in the field and you go, this play is not going to work in this context.
yes. I love it. When you have led sales teams, what do you think are some of those triggers that start that fixed mindset for folks?
Fear,
Yeah.
fear and time-bound constraints. So we operate from this scarcity mindset that says, my title's higher than yours, so I'm smarter than yours. I'm under more pressure than you. There's more zeros on my quota than yours, so I'm going to tell you what to do. And by the way, most of the time, and I think this is more true in sales than in a lot of other professions, people who become sales leaders are former salespeople. So the playbook they're conveying to you is how they were successful when they did that job. And it's fascinating to me because most executives carry this well all the way up the chain into their chief revenue officer roles. And
Yeah.
they haven't done direct sales in so many years, but they're still giving you their playbook from 15 or 20 years ago that got them their first promotion, then their second promotion, and they're just going to tell you to do it that way. It doesn't matter if we do digital selling now, people. Print out a newsletter and mail it to your customers. That's how we're going to win. Right? It's not funny. We do it every day. We just think, I got promoted because I'm better than you and more proficient than you at this job that I've done. And that's the real trick with sales leaders is you've almost always done the job.
Yes.
Usually at that same organization or in that same industry. And so you're convinced that because you got promoted and they didn't, you have the lock on the one successful
The
playbook,
way. Yeah.
the way. and we must all do the way. And then people will set up huge amounts of reviews, ops, dashboards, all managed around this playbook. And then along will come some corporate and marketing people and add some other things in that you don't find valuable, but you're forced to run in the playbook.
Mm-hmm.
And then here we are. Fear, I'm not going to make my number. Scarcity, there's not enough time to get all this done. And then the people tend to get more directive and more command and control when actually what we need is the exact opposite in that instance, which is to get curious and create choices of things to try.
Yeah. Well, and it's that whole concept of when you are managing people, that is an authority relationship. So the telling sometimes feels natural, but the reality is that as a manager, your responsibility now is to get results through other people, right? Through and with other people, not because you told other people what to do, right? But you've come alongside and you are getting those results through them. And by doing that, you actually are creating your own capacity for growth and your own development as a leader and as an individual that contributes in higher and better ways. But too often it's the telling that we focus on as the manager, because now I have the authority to tell you what to do. So I find that interesting. Karen, can you reflect on some of your background and maybe on a story in which you felt like you made a difference in someone's life?
Yes. And what comes to mind for me because it's meaningful is that if you've ever taken Strengths Finder or any of these types of analysis diagnostics that identify your top couple of strengths,
Mhm.
one that really resonates with me from Strengths Finder that's in the top of my list is maximizer.
Mhm.
A maximizer, if you're not familiar with that, for those listening, is someone who finds incredible delight in discovering someone's hidden talent or potential. And it says, polishing that like a fine diamond.
Mm.
I love to help people discover their potential or a hidden passion or maybe a dream deferred and guide them down the path of giving themselves permission to fully step into realizing that dream or pursuing that goal or going for that job themselves. And a beautiful example of how that came around in an interesting way is a couple of years ago, I got a message from a longtime friend who is also in the technology industry. And the message said, I know you do career coaching and I need some career coaching. Can you help me? I said, okay, sure. And we got on a call together and he said something very funny. He said, I'm sure that you've noticed the last several times we've been together at events that I've been avoiding you. I was like, I've missed that entirely. My apologies. Either I'm very intuitive or you're not very good at ignoring me. I'm not sure which it is. Out of curiosity, why are you ignoring me? He said, well, things just aren't going that great in the environment that I'm in. And I have this idea and I think I might want to start a business. And I don't know because, I'm invested here and I made this commitment and I have some equity. And so over the course of a couple of conversations, I finally looked at him and said, I think you know what you want and need to do. And so here's the gift I'm going to give you. Permission granted.
Mm.
You have permission to do what you already know that you need and want to do for yourself. He quit his job 2 weeks later and started a company. And it's the company that I'm now the president and chief strategy officer of. That one came back in kind of a comical way. And in this case, sometimes what happens is we make a commitment to something and we think that that commitment has to be forever, even
Yeah.
if lots of
Yeah.
things around that commitment shift.
Yeah.
This person had all the potential in the world to become an entrepreneur and a leader. He needed someone else to reflect that back to him and say, I see it too. I see the leader in you.
Mhm.
You can do this. That was all it took.
Just a little affirmation.
Just a little affirmation and then kind of permission granted. A lot of times we're all waiting for a doctor or a boss or a spouse or a parent to give us permission to know to do what we already want and need to do. And I get lots of people who read my books and will say, because of reading your book, I finally decided I'm going to go on a vacation. It's like, you already knew you needed to do that. You knew you needed a break. All the book did was give you the permission that you wanted someone else to give you to do what you know you already needed or wanted to do.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I want you to share a little bit about this joy challenge that you're doing. Because when we connected a couple weeks ago, you had mentioned to me, like, I'm thinking about doing a joy challenge this next year. So I want you to talk to all of our listeners about what this is and share it and how they could even get involved.
Something I was thinking about was, when was the last time you did something just for the fun of it?
Hmm.
Not to be good at it, not to master it, not to make it your new driving ambition in life, just for the joy of it.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about how I felt and how a lot of us felt, I think, in that 2021-ish phase where it's evident that we weren't going back to the way things were and we weren't technically locked down, and yet we weren't really fully into this newly formed state, and people were still feeling isolated. And I thought, how can I just bring some more joy into my life? How can I do something for fun? And I thought about something I'd always wanted to do and had never done, which was learn how to tap dance. And so my brother gave me money for tap dancing shoes for my birthday, not because I couldn't afford them. It was just earmarking some joy funds, let's say.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I am happy to share with you that I just passed my 100th tap dancing lesson.
Oh.
And I'm not awesome. I do it for the joy of it. I do tap dancing Tuesdays because it's fun. And so I started thinking about, as we're in this time of year where, just because of the time of year it is, there tends to be more darkness. There is less actual light at this time of year.
Yep.
And I was thinking about how often when we come into the beginning of a new year, our goals are all about things we're going to cut. You're going to do sober January. Somebody's going to do the Whole30 program. Somebody's going on a diet. I mean, we're just going to cut things out of our lives. And I thought, what if instead I took an abundance mindset and thought to myself, what would I add to my life that would be
Mhm.
truly fantastic? And I thought, you know what I have an appetite for? A lot more joy, a lot more of those tap dancing moments, per se,
Yeah.
incorporated everywhere else. And so as that has evolved, what I've realized is it's about looking for bright spots.
Hmm.
Every dysfunctional team has a bright spot performing person, right?
Yeah.
Every dysfunctional family has a bright spot of a person. Every day, every moment, there are these little bright spots. And so I am going to do this January joy journal where every day for the month of January, while everyone else is Whole30 cutting things out of their life, I am going to add bright spots and joy and bring those into focus. So I invite people to join me in putting those things out there. And what happens, or my hypothesis of what will happen going into this, is there are inevitably more bright spots and moments of pure joy in each day than I pause long enough to internalize and appreciate. And by bringing that into focus, what I'm trying to train my brain to do is see some great things and some bright spots in a very dark time of year,
Hmm.
as opposed to training my brain to keep focusing on, like, it's still dark, it's still dreary.
Hmm. Yeah. Or push
And
through,
so
push through.
I invite your listeners to come on that journey also and make it a joyous January.
I love that. And I love that you're tap dancing. It's so fun. I I have a tap dancing story from high school. I was in the play 42nd Street, which is a tap dancing show.
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
Great show. I love that show. And I was in geometry, and I'm not a math person at all. And I was like falling asleep in class. I remember my teacher called me out and he was like, "Why are you falling asleep in my class?" I was like, "I am in 42nd Street. I don't think you understand how hard I am working." And he was like, "Whatever." And I said, "No, I will tap dance the opening number on your desk. And if I do that, you have to promise to let me pass this class. I have to get at least to see if I tap dance on your desk." He was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." So sure enough, the next day I came in with my big, huge boom box and my tap shoes, and I did the opening number to 42nd Street on his desk. And everybody was like, "What is happening?" And I was like, "I just secured a passing grade in my math class. That is what just happened." But
Well done.
lots of joy there. Joy in performing, joy in passing the math class, all kinds of things. So Karen, this has been so great. If people want to reach out to you, connect with you more, what's the best way for them to do that?
I regularly put new content and engage with people on LinkedIn and across your other favorite social media platforms. I find there's lots of engagement on LinkedIn, even though the content is pretty much everywhere you would want to be. You can subscribe to the Success from Anywhere podcast on your preferred podcast platform. And all of my books are available on Amazon and beyond.
Awesome. Karen, thank you so much for being here. I love the wisdom that you shared with us was just awesome. And I know it's going to change people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Wasn't that so great? Oh, I love what she had to share. I love that she talked about being a great big Sicilian and her family. She actually recently just wrote this great book. It's a cookbook, actually, that she talked about with her grandfather. It's really great. I hope that you check out some of her books. I hope that you found some of those hacks and those ideas that she presented as ways in which you can focus on finding more joy in your life, or finding ways which you can set goals and prioritize what needs to be prioritized this year. If you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, be sure to check that out. Go to www.growthreefold.com/made for impact and sign on up. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love it if you'd share it with others or share with me your thoughts. In the meantime, remember, you are made for impact.